the serious question that I want to ask is, if it's so easy to go through the Strait of Hormuz for our NATO allies, why doesn't the United States just attempt to do it ourselves?
Progressive host Adam Mockler was a guest on Abby Phillips' CNN show to go up against MAGA pundits Scott Jennings and Bonner Lyman. We're going to take a look at clips of this debate with Adam Mockler, Brianna Lyman, Scott Jennings on Abby Phillips' show. The panel also included Charles Blow and Alex Pistis. I want to share my thoughts on this one, too. Let's get into it together.
President Trump is asking skeptical Americans to keep the war in Iran in perspective. In a speech to the nation tonight, the president compared the current situation to other major conflicts in modern American history. Listen.
American involvement in World War I lasted 1 year, 7 months, and 5 days. World War II lasted for 3 years, 8 months, and 25 days. The Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. The Vietnam War lasted for 19 years, 5 months, and 29 days. Iraq went on for 8 years, 8 months, and 28 days. We are in this military operation, so powerful, so brilliant, against one of the most powerful countries for 32 days. And the country has been eviscerated and essentially is really no longer a threat. This is a true investment in your children and your grandchildren's future.
Sounds like he's trying to convince the American people of something that they fundamentally don't believe. And it's interesting because when you look at all of these other conflicts throughout history, a lot of which he named there, they were so much more popular than the war in Iran, which is that red bar that you see at the bottom there at 41% support. The president is trying to claw back from a pretty deep hole here of public disapproval.
Yeah, and I would note that when it comes to Afghanistan and Iraq, early polling indicated before we did that it was actually very popular among the American people. And as we know now, in hindsight, it wasn't actually popular. It was the wrong decision to make for a lot of people, I think. So I don't know if polling necessarily indicates that this is the right or wrong move. I would also say President Trump is right to tell Americans to keep things into perspective, because you do have a lot of people on the left who constantly say, Donald Trump is putting us in bigger danger by going after Iran, when that was the same party that had no problem running a proxy war against Russia that does have nuclear weapons. We were giving Ukraine intelligence for long-range missiles in Russia. We were actively sending them money. We had Shapiro signing missiles to send to Ukraine to put into Russia. So when you put those things into perspective, it's hard to take seriously half of the country's dissatisfaction with the president when they were rallying against war with an actual nuclear power.
You're saying that we should not have been supporting Ukraine?
I do not think that was our war.
Wow. Damn. So you guys are going to complain in one breath we shouldn't support Ukraine at all. And then you'll be like, wait a minute, those same allies refuse to come help us over in Europe when
we helped
we're
Ukraine
in
at the end of the day, and they still didn't come back and help us. So what's your point?
I mean, my point is
war.
My point
You're
is
talking about NATO didn't help us.
I'm talking about the fact that the United States had no real necessary obligation to step in and help Ukraine, but we did alongside other NATO allies. And the fact remains, to your point, we still went and did it. But when we ask for some assistance, whether it's sharing intelligence, whether it's using some naval bases, they say, oh, we don't want to get involved. And I know what you're going to say, Adam, because you said it last time. Well, Article 5 wasn't invoked. There are other non-triggering events that can get NATO to work with the United States, and they refuse to do so.
Well, the real problem here is that asking allied ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz, which is 21 miles wide, but the most navigable shipping lane is 2 miles wide, means that it's almost a suicide mission. I mean, off the coast of Iran, they'll just continually strike our allies. And the serious question that I want to ask is, if it's so easy to go through the Strait of Hormuz for our NATO allies, why doesn't the United States just attempt to do it ourselves?
I think also the point that President Trump has been making when it comes to NATO is that our NATO allies are willing to do low-risk endeavors. So Operation Sea Guardian, they're willing to protect the Mediterranean because they're going to watch for terrorists. They're going to make sure ships go through. But when there is something that impacts them, the Strait of Hormuz impacts them more than it does us. The Strait of Hormuz actually qualifies as more of a humanitarian potential disaster because of the sulfur that travels there for farming and everything else. Iran did when they decided to start attacking people. When you have those things, you have NATO allies who are not willing to step up when there is some risk possibly associated with it. And that goes to President Trump's point. They are freeloaders. They are only available when it benefits them solely, but not when it would help their allies and eventually them in the long term.
Most of the NATO countries were part of the Iran deal. They had negotiated with us. We were dealing with the issue. We were dealing with the nuclear material. Donald Trump snatches us out of that. Then he rushes into this war only with Israel. And then he asks the people who had negotiated that former deal to say, now that I've done this on my own, you need to come and help me out. I didn't deal with you on the front end. I didn't negotiate with you. I didn't ask you for your help or planning or anything. But now that I have done this on my own, it is your responsibility to come and help us out. It's an extraordinary claim.
So just off the polling data, it's interesting. I usually don't.
I want to pause here for just a moment.
So, Brianna Lyman's arguments here to me are incredibly stupid. There's no comparison between Ukraine and Iran. Ukraine was a country, or is a country attacked and invaded by Russia. And Iran is a war in a country that Donald Trump chose to attack. She says, I wish Adam Mockler would have pushed and pressed Brianna Lyman more here when he said, "Who started it?" And she said, Iran did. That's Donald Trump started this war. Everybody knows it. The American people know it. And that's why this is only polling at, I think this is a generous poll here of 40% or 41%. I've seen other polls in the 30s of approval because this is a war that the United States never should have gotten into. The United States and other allies helping out Ukraine is very, very different. Like Charles Blow is saying here, Trump went it alone or went it into it with Israel. If he had talked to our allies, which he views as enemies essentially, if Donald Trump had talked to our allies and said, hey, we need to go and do this, maybe they would have gone along with it. Maybe they wouldn't have, or maybe they would have tried to talk him out of it. But Charles Blow is absolutely right that if one ally does something incredibly stupid, do all of the other allies have to defend them and go along with it? I don't think that's the way things work. Ukraine was being attacked and is being attacked. It would be different if Brianna Lyman's argument might work if Ukraine had attacked Russia and then said, hey, we need everybody to help us out. But that wasn't what happened. They were defending themselves. The United States. No matter how many times Scott Jennings and all the rest of the MAGA people, Brianna Lyman, and all the rest say 47 years. 47 years. This was not a war of the United States protecting itself. This was a war of aggression that the vast majority of Americans didn't want. And also I want to say with Brianna Lyman, her talking about Iraq being unpopular, it should have been unpopular, but it was popular especially among the right. And if she had been around then, Brianna Lyman, she would have been 100% saber-rattling for that war, with George W. Bush and Scott Jennings would have done the same. They might say now that it was a bad idea because that's what Donald Trump says, but they wouldn't have been saying that at the time.
In the politics, but this is the one time where the politics and the military strategy are actually tied together. So what I thought was interesting when you show the polling data, part of Iran's strategy, the asymmetric strategy they've tried to employ here, raise the cost of oil and goods by holding the straits at risk, maximize U.S. casualties as part of that, elongate the war because they don't think the president has the stomach for it, and then try to divide the base. The four of those things are centered around what they believe and what I'm hearing from the Gulf and from Iranians, from folks on the inside. The core of the strategy is they believe that the president is concerned about the midterm elections and that they want to make sure that they put enough pressure on him where he feels he's going to lose. And they think that's they think that's the pressure point to get the war to stop. So it's the difference in this type of war is you actually have an adversary who is actively seeking to divide a president's base as part of the strategy, which is interesting because they realize they can't compete with the U.S. conventionally.
But that long view is really important. I think this is another thing that we have not talked enough about with the American people, which is that when we're dealing with ancient societies, Iran is 2,600 years old. Their oldest city is 4,000 to 7,000 years old. They have a very long view. This area has been losing wars since Alexander the Great. I mean, they still maintain themselves. They come back. They bounce back. We are about to celebrate a 250th year anniversary of being a country. We're younger. I think that other places in the world just take a longer view, and they know that our view is shorter. And our attention span is shorter. Our patience is shorter. We want immediate results, and that's not how they're operating.
They're also a democracy, and they know that. They know that is, in a situation like this, it's something that they can use to their advantage. And they're not wrong about that, because Trump is, as he said today, going to end this war in 2 to 3 weeks. And guess what? We haven't secured the nuclear material. Iran has gotten sanctions relief. They're tolling ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They're making tons of money where they weren't making it before. There are some parts of this where Iran feels like, well, he's going to end the war regardless, and we're just going to rebuild at the end of it.
I agree with a lot of what you said. Their strategy is somewhat political. I think what the president was asking for tonight was a little bit more patience from the American people, 2 to 3 more weeks for large-scale military operations. And at that point, I assume what we're going to hear is we've destroyed every target that we had when we started. We've degraded their military down to effectively zero. I assume at some point in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to hear what Israel thinks about how they want to end this. And then ultimately, in the big piece, which we don't have much information to debate on, is what is the status of the diplomatic conversations going on behind the scenes, winding this down over 3 weeks, coinciding with some kind of details about that. That would be the next political trigger point. And if some of this comes out the way we want it, I think you could see the polling change with the American people saying, oh yeah, it was a short engagement and we did wind up with some.
But if we say we're degrading their capabilities and Israelis are still running to shelters, I don't think the Israelis are going to be satisfied. Even no matter what we say about how much we have degraded their capabilities, if the rockets are still raining down on Israeli cities and they're still running to shelters 12 times a day, they're not going to be satisfied.
I don't disagree with that. And they don't want that. I agree
a
with
quick
you.
word on why that is happening. Why we are still seeing, despite the degrading, all of these missiles still heading toward Israel and the Gulf allies.
Sure. So the remaining missile launchers are largely inside or covered facilities or under mountainous terrain or whatnot, which is why we're basically using strategic bombers to try to get the remaining of the launchers that are left. We're not done with the war. So tonight's speech was there's still 2 or 3 weeks left. So the point that was made, there's still 3,000 targets left. So I think we really won't know where we are until those remaining 3,000 targets are hit, till we see the remainder of the diplomatic negotiations and to whether or not we're going to be able to extract material or we're going to end up in a persistent stare. So still a couple of unanswered questions, still some military operations to go, still some more diplomacy. And these are valid questions I think we're going to be asking for the next couple of weeks until this is done.
All right, next for us. Could Trump be headed to his second big defeat in the Supreme Court?
So, I hope the media is not dumb enough to fall for this 2 to 3 weeks nonsense from Donald Trump. I definitely think Abby Phillip is too smart for that. But that has been Donald Trump's game since 2016. Everything is, oh, we're going to do this in 2 weeks. We're going to have a great healthcare plan in 2 weeks. We're going to have this in 2 weeks. Because he knows 2 weeks is about how long the media can pay attention to one story. Now, this war is too big of a story for it to just be swept aside for something else, because it's having such a huge impact on everything just about in the world. It's having huge economic impacts, obviously having huge impact on oil prices. But no one actually believes the two thing. That's another reason why so many Americans are against this war. They're asking for the $200 billion, which I don't know why you wouldn't say, hey, you've got $1 trillion defense budget. Find some money in there. Go looking around in the couch cushions and all of that, and find some money for your idiotic war. But $200 billion is equal to about what was being spent on Iraq and Afghanistan combined for 2 years. So unless Trump and his buddies are planning on just taking that money and sticking it in their pockets, which they might be, this war is going to go on for a lot longer than 2 to 3. So Scott Jennings and all the rest can say whatever they want about, oh, this is wrapping up. This is going to be over soon. This is going to be a short war. Does anybody buy that? I certainly don't. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with what Adam Mockler and Charles Blow had to say here? Or are you on the side of the Megans and Scott Jennings and Brianna Lyman on this episode of Abby Phillips Show? Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next.